We just saw The Raid 2, and the way this show works is we will give you a quick overview of whether we like the movie or not before we get into a lot of detail. So if you want to take our recommendation and go see it, then you can just do that. Or if you want to skip spoilers and that kind of thing, you can stop and come back to us after you've seen it. I really liked this movie. I didn't know anything about The Raid, the first movie. I ended up seeing that one last night just to kind of, not so I wouldn't miss anything, or just to make sure that there wasn't, important stuff from the first one for the second one. We both saw the first one for the first time last night, and we liked it. And it was the first one's very good. It's a good action movie. Really small scope. Has a very similar plot to like the 2012 Dread movie, which actually came out afterward. And the second one is just, it's so much bigger. It's more of a crime story. It's more character development. There's still a lot of action in it. It's almost twice as long as the first movie. But it's just a really well done, hard R action movie that really works. It's great. If you're someone that likes action movies in general, and or likes crime movies or any of those sorts of things, we talked a little bit about similarities to something like Kill Bill Part 1. Not quite as violent as that, but it is violent. It's a hard R movie. It's really, really good. The only word of caution that I would say about it would be that it's not in English. It's an Indonesian film, so you will be watching subtitles. And with the first one, there wasn't as much dialogue, but there's a lot more in this, so there is a little bit more reading. But if you can get past that, if that kind of stuff doesn't bother you normally, I would say definitely check it out, and check it out in the theater, because it deserves to be seen.
Yeah, I'm not a huge action movie fan, and so I was pleasantly surprised at how much I enjoyed it. And I think, yes, there's a lot of action and there's a lot of fight scenes, but for lack of a better word, they're beautiful. I mean, they're well done, they're well choreographed, and there's also plenty of other things going on. I mean, I think the character development is good. I think the storyline is good. I think it was a well spent 2.5 hours. Certainly. Yeah.
So definitely go and check it out. If you want to avoid spoiler territory and want to come back to this later, that's cool. We'll probably talk a little bit more detail now. But the other thing I wanted to point out quickly before we move into that was, do you have to see the first one to enjoy the second one? And I don't think you do. I think the first one's a good film and it's enjoyable. The characters that survive the first one are in the second one, so there is some carryover from the story. But it's kind of this interesting development where the intention was to make the second film was what the writer-director wanted to do, and they couldn't get the budget to do it. I think that it was a $4.5 million budget for this second movie. So they wrote a completely different movie and did that as The Raid 1 to kind of prove the abilities and see how well it would do, and they did like $1 million movie. So it's interesting in that, the watered down sequel is actually the first one and not the second one. Mm-hmm. It's not like they had a successful movie and they had to come up with a story, and it's not like the second one is a retelling at all, or same guy, different, same guy, same basic situation. You know, like it's not like the Die Hard 1, Die Hard 2 sort of thing where instead of a building, it's a plane, you know, a
Yeah.
airport thing. So it's they're almost different genres of movies. The first one is very much like a martial arts movie, and the second one has martial arts in it, but it's more, there's more crime, there's more character, there's more everything.
I think I don't think you necessarily would have to see the movie, but I do think there would be some benefit in like reading a synopsis of the characters again.
Yeah.
Or at least sort of the main plot points, because there are people who come back and there's sort of, it helps to know there's some history there, like what their previous relationships are and how they relate to each other and why it's notable that that person shows up in that scene and those kinds of things.
So the first movie, it's the main guy is part of a police raid that they go in to take out this crime boss who has like control of this tenement building, this 15-story building. And in that movie, it comes to light that the raid wasn't really officially sanctioned, that there's corrupt police that are involved in it. The main guy, like the main protagonist of the film, not like the main, you know, guy on the police or anything like that, but the center point of the movie, his brother is one of the like top henchmen of the crime boss. And so they're sort of helping each other out as much as they can but also, you know, fighting for their side. And where the second one kind of picks up like right after the first one ends. So it's, instead of it being a raid against a crime boss, he's actually tasked with rooting out corruption inside the police force. And so what they end up doing is they get him sent to jail basically to go undercover and become part of this crime family so that they can find out which police officers are involved in taking bribes and that sort of stuff from the crime family. And he ends up in jail for a long time, like years, before getting out. And it's kind of like, it's a little bit similar to like what happens in The Departed, where they have like the undercover cop that goes into the crime family, and they have the undercover criminal that goes into the police. And so he's supposed to be rooting out, you know, the corruption and the crime and all of that. And so he's just this deep undercover.
Yeah, and specifically, he's befriending the son of kind of the crime lord that is also in jail at the same time, and so that's where kind of he makes that connection, and they become friends, and I thought that, I mean, and so then once he leaves jail, he has to still sort of prove himself
right
to the crime family, and really, I mean, he's so deep undercover that there's some, you know, choices he has to make in order to maintain his cover, which I thought was...
And they're like the Chinese family, where the movie takes place in Jakarta, and I guess there's a Chinese crime syndicate and there's a Japanese crime syndicate, and they have this sort of truce about, you know, boundaries of territory and what they're allowed to do where, and they've like been peaceful for the last 10 years, but part of that peace has been, you know, due to the corruption in the police force. And the son character also gets out of jail and sort of detonates all of that because he wants to, like, he feels like the Japanese aren't really respecting the...
Well, and it's his ambition. I mean, he feels like his dad isn't taking him seriously enough.
Right.
And so he wants to prove himself, and so he kind of rashly decides to stir the pot,
Yeah, so
I guess.
he basically wants to start a war between the Chinese and the Japanese crime bosses. So like watching that, move from the two bosses like meeting and being respectful to one another, and then meeting and trying to like not have it go wrong, and then it just keeps escalating and escalating, and the main guy is caught in the middle of everything, and sort of he's sort of trying to keep his cover, but also find the corrupt cops, and also like to a degree protect the son as much as he can, because he has to, like, that's the connection he's been making this whole time, and he like left his wife and kid at home for years and years to try and do this, so he's trying to make that all work. But yeah, there's a lot of just really well, like the character part of it's great, the story part of it's great, and then the action sequences that were so great in the first one are back, and there's so much care and thought that goes into everything. There's something special about every fight scene. There's no just sort of boilerplate, martial arts scene. There's always, some kind of a creative stab through a wall, or, there's
mud pit.
Or this girl that fights with hammers. And
that's my favorite part. And I was actually just thinking that I think the other thing that made it enjoyable is that for as much as it fits into that, it doesn't take it seriously. Like, there's a girl who uses hammers to fight, who is also deaf and possibly blind in one eye.
Yeah, partially blind.
Yeah.
There's another guy that fights with a baseball bat and baseballs. He can hit a baseball into someone's head, like, from a distance, and it's not like over the top campy, but it's also not, taking itself so seriously that it can't be funny and do funny things like that. It's also something where there's probably some humor that might be a little bit lost in translation, but some of the stuff that they talk about is it can be fairly funny. There's not a lot of movies like this. I mean, there's not a lot of hard R, crime action movies that do everything that this movie does as well as it does. Comparing it to like a Scorsese film, like I said, The Departed earlier, or Goodfellas or something like that. It's definitely more. I would say there's definitely more of a focus on action than in a Scorsese film, but it's still, if it were made by an American, if it were made by an American company and in English and all of that stuff, I could see it very easily comparing between the two. It's just there's a language barrier to it that makes it a little bit harder to follow than it would normally be, and like I couldn't tell you, I couldn't tell you all the characters' names or exactly how they all fit together. It's something that it would probably benefit from, like, going online and sort of reading a backstory for all of the characters and going and seeing it again and kind of getting a feel for how all that worked. But I mean, to say that I want to go and see a 2.5 hour action movie again, that's pretty high praise. Like, I can't say enough good about this movie. It's one of those things that I think it's off a lot of people's radar. I think there's only a few people that saw The Raid, and I think, like me, most people probably assume that The Raid 2 is just the same thing. Yeah, it's just the same formula with a bigger budget, and or with a slightly different like the Die Hard 2 thing, where it's the same storyline. It just takes place in a different location, and they do a couple of the beats different, but other than that, it's the same movie. This is totally different. And they've said that if they do a third movie, which it seems like they will, that the third movie will also be a slightly different style. So if the first one was a straight up martial arts movie and this one was a crime movie, maybe they're going to go into something that's even more character driven, or you could see it going a lot of different ways.
I'd like the girl for the hammer with the hammers to be involved.
Yeah, that would be fun. Or have something with his wife.
Yeah,
bringing her into it a little bit
Yeah.
more. But yeah, I mean it's a 2.5 hour Indonesian action movie with subtitles that, I mean, if you're up for a hard R action movie and the violence doesn't scare you away and the subtitles doesn't scare you away, definitely check it out.
Yeah, I think, and you talked about this with the other person that you knew who saw it. I don't think it's a movie to see by yourself because you'll want to talk about it.
Oh yeah.
And so I think it would make a fine date movie or take a group of people, but I think you'll be sad if you go by yourself because you'll want to spend some time kind of dissecting it and thinking about it. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I if I had seen it by myself, I would have like tried to find someone to drag to it to see it a second time, because it's just it's too good not to share. It's that kind of movie. So we liked it. Hope you enjoyed our video. Check out all the rest of our movie reviews. You can check out the written reviews as well at dalemaxfield.com. Thanks for watching.